Hey guys, today I'm going to be painting Vahlrose, which is kind of like a Necromancer chick from Limbo Eternal War. It was a Kickstarter game that'll be on Kickstarter again later this year. I'm looking forward to that in either Q3 or Q4. They're going to have a few more expansions. For now, though, I've just been enjoying painting these awesome sculpts. This was actually a really fun one. One of the reasons I chose this as the second one that I painted for this series is just because the bone altar that she has behind her gave me an opportunity to paint black bone, like almost like a charred bone. It's a very cool effect. It's one of my favorite things I've done. I've done it once before on a Demon Vanguard by the miniature line that this game was originally based off of, and I think it turned out even better this time. It's really something great. You'll see that towards the end I keep it black for the majority, and then I paint it almost at the very end before I do some kind of magical glow effects on her and such. But for now I'm just kind of doing my typical paints, and all the stuff that I used to paint is down in the link below, so you can see the list of paints that I used and where I put them. And the key here, I think, is to make sure that her kind of like skeleton bra thing is it's noticeably different than her skin tone, because I painted her kind of a creamy, pale skin tone. I didn't want to do like a deathly, like more vampire look, like, with some more blue into it. So it's still a healthy skin tone, but it is quite pale. So we just want to make sure that kind of pops out from her skeleton clothing as well. And then she has this wonderful robe that I think would look great in purple. I tend to do all necromancers in purple, or sorceresses in purple. I'm not sure why. I don't know if that's normal or not. I've done it anywhere from video game characters I've made to other miniatures. The Necromancer and Black Rose Wars I also painted with a purple dress, though that actually matched their art. And this one of the great things about a Limbo Eternal War is that you can paint it however you wish. All of the art is this kind of hand-drawn in sepia tones, and so you get to pick the colors, and I think that's just a lot of fun to do. I really enjoy that. So there is a little bit more bone on her. She has this kind of bone spine belt, because why not? And then she has a few skulls that you'll also be putting in that same bone color. And another great thing about painting the altar in this kind of charred black bone is it makes the skulls pop out a little bit, which is kind of nice. Now I'm going to use a wash here because, you would be remiss not to with the texture that robe has. It just pulls in so well. And then you just get to highlighting, and as always you highlight as good as possible. For her skin, it's just a typical flesh wash, and you just want to make sure it doesn't actually pull too much in her chest, because otherwise you just get this brown line. So you don't want a whole bunch there. Actually, you probably have to dab it out a little bit. It tends to look a little dirty, and you don't want it to just look painted, right? The whole point is to make this look natural. But otherwise, highlighting is pretty easy. It's just a very thin down paint consistency, almost like melted ice cream, and then take it a little bit more, and you should be pretty good. Almost like a stew thickness. And it'll look brighter when you're first painting it on because it's wet, and so it's reflecting the light that you're using to kind of light the miniature while you're painting it, and it dries and tends to be a little bit smoother. And when you're highlighting this thin, you can kind of play around with it. You can add multiple coats, you can feather it out a little bit, you can blend it a little bit. You'll notice there on the bottom I did it a little too bright there, and all I did was add the wash over it again. Worked just fine. So if you ever kind of mess up, typically you can just reapply the wash, and that'll help blend it all back together again. Now this miniature does pose a little bit of a problem in the back area there, just because her back's to the altar, and so you have the altar and then of course her back, and highlighting that and coloring that's a little difficult. Priming in black helps. First of all, it colors all that bone for you that you're going to keep black, but also it kind of acts as like a shadow, so it's not as noticeable. If you had primed her white or light gray or something like that, it would have been a little bit worse. So now we're on to highlighting the skin, and again, just kind of a very thin glazing almost. You want it to kind of really gradually increase. So I put a couple layers of highlights on her, a couple coats, just to get it the consistency I wanted and blending it as well as I can. I could have spent a little bit more time on it, but at the end of the day, this is still just a miniature for a board game. I want to pack her up when I'm done. I'm not displaying her or anything like that. But if you're going to spend the time to paint her at all, you may as well do a good job on it, I always feel. So again, as you can see, I'm going even lighter now, and then just getting, the raised parts of her just so that it's like reflecting kind of a typical daylight. I don't tend to do a lot of object source lighting except for effects like flames or lava or magic sources. But I don't pretend that there's a spotlight on her or anything like that. So I'm assuming she's just out in the day and the sun's up and it kind of lighting just about everything in a general overhead fashion. When you're highlighting something like the rib cage bra that she has, or even just rib cages in general, actually, you have to be a little careful because you've thinned down your paints for the highlights so it goes smoothly, but a thinned down paint wants to fall into crevices too, so you can't have too much on your brush. If you do, it'll pool into the crevices and undo the wash that you did beforehand. And this, I mean, it even affects like these skull eye sockets and stuff like that, so you just gonna have to be careful. And what I tend to do is just have less on my brush, so I'll soak it up and I'll get a lot of it out on my wet palette, and then I'll also kind of lightly brush it along a napkin or a paper towel or something like that to kind of soak up a little bit more. You have to refill your brush more, but it's better than having to repaint something. Now for her skeleton, it's going to be or not her skeleton, her helmet, it's going to be quite dark. However, I think that the highlighting really adds a lot of definition and looks cool, but still keeps that dark look to it. I didn't want her to look like she's wearing a crown. At least not a crown you would expect a king or queen to wear. Maybe something a little bit more evil or demonic. And so just there shouldn't really be a lot of brightness on her. The only kind of real big bright spot I'm actually doing is her little magic she has on her hand. Otherwise, it's a pretty dark miniature. So another great thing about that is between the kind of the dark purple and then the black bone altar, she really stands out in her pale skin a lot. So she's definitely the centerpiece of this miniature. The only other big splash of color I have is a red cloth that I'll be doing soon that I think is really nice. Her horns, I like a dark red-brown. But more brown or more red than brown, actually. I tend to enjoy that more, at least for like demons and stuff like that. You can do brown, but you see a lot of brown horns, and I don't feel like it differentiates itself enough for like a demon horn versus like antlers on a moose or something like that. So I think going a little bit more red with something like a cavalry brown or a burnt red or something like that, I tend to lean more towards. And these, I don't know what these are. I don't know if they're horns or tentacles or what. They're coming out of the back of her head. And the art doesn't quite match how the miniature was assembled. And then I also had to do the hot water treatment to really kind of move those. So this highlight of the helmet, I think, is really important. It gives it its shape. Again, you're viewing these on the tabletop, not up close. I try to get my miniatures to look good up close and then look great from a distance. And so I want it to be blended nicely, but you need to be able to tell that there's some shape there. And if it's too dark, you're just not going to be able to see it. So I'm giving it a more highlight, even though it makes it a little bit brighter. I think in the end it works out quite well. And then of course, again, even though this texture looks great, how you're seeing it on a stark white background and up close, you're going to have the miniature farther away. You need to be able to tell the texture. And especially because unlike a lot of board games, these horns are perfect. There's texture throughout all of them, and it's a perfect cast for the sculpt. There's no loss of detail anywhere that I could tell. A lot of times, especially towards the end of the horn, it gets a little soft in the details in a lot of these, but these ended up great, so I may as well highlight those up too. And I think it gives them kind of a cool look, especially when I wasn't sure if they were, tentacles or horns or what. They seem to be more tentacle than horn, I felt, but I went ahead and just kind of painted them the same. You could do them two different colors, I think, if you want. All right, now we're almost done. We're getting the magic here, and I'm just going to do a base coat of the magic. I'm going to do the object source lighting last. And most people, when they do OSL or object source lighting, they tend to exaggerate it to a great degree. If you've seen people paint Kingdom Death Monster, I guarantee then you've seen people exaggerate what a lantern's glow would do. It pretty much, a lot of people like to go from pure darkness to bright light. And I tend to actually do more minimalist OSL to where it's not casting its glow, several feet away or anything like that. I know some people that would even have the ground below her glow, and I just whenever I see that, I think it looks cool. It's a very neat an interesting art style, but not really something that's realistic to me that I want to see in a miniature, so I tend not to do it. Here's that red, like I said, and it's an army painter color that I chose. Again, the link in the list is in the description below. And so it took a couple coats. I'm not going to show you all the coats, but army painter pigmentation doesn't seem to be very dense in its medium. It's kind of acrylic medium that it's using to put the paint on the brush, and so you tend to have to do a lot, especially on something like red, where it's covering something like black. But red is also a great color. Again, you could have done this more purple. You could have done this anything you wanted. I liked the red because I like red and black, and I think it's a nice stark contrast. And then I also have that green from the glow, so I wanted to kind of complement the two colors, and red and green go quite well together, as long as you avoid it looking kind of like Christmas. So this is an interesting style, and so I'm going to explain it a little bit. I don't know if other people have done this. I kind of did this through experimentation on my first one. So you prime in black or base coat in black, and then you get gray. And you get something like a Necromancer's Cloak or something very dark gray. I think this is black gray from Vallejo. And then you start highlighting, so it's still just gray. And then you get a brighter gray like this. I think this is uniform gray. Mechanicus standard gray would work just as well, probably. And you're still highlighting. The reason you're highlighting this is because you're going to be adding a wash, and you want that to actually tint it a little bit, and it won't tint black. And so I'm going to put a brown wash on this to make it actually like a very dark brown. And you kind of need this highlight to do it. It's a good way to do an OSL as well. If you highlight a dark area and then put a wash on it, it'll tint just the wash. I don't highlight it to that degree to where it would do that. It's a dark wash I put on it. But if you were to do, let's say, another level of highlight to highlight it even more and then put like a red wash on it or a yellow wash on it, you would have almost a glowing effect. It's a very good way to do that. In this, I'm just trying to tint the color ever so slightly before I do the dry brush. And I'm going to go ahead and paint the rim. One of the nice things about this holder that I'm using here by Redgrass Games is that you can kind of spin it around. I like my Citadel holder very much. However, sometimes it just makes sense to not clamp the edge so I can paint it ahead of time. So here's that brown wash. It's just Agrax Earthshade. You could use any brown wash. Typically the darker the better, but it doesn't necessarily matter. You just kind of want the contrast to be up there. So this is just, again, just tinting it ever so slightly, making it a little bit more brown, a little bit less black. Then I got the Null Oil out for the little bit of base. You don't see a lot. She covers most of it. She takes up her base. And for black hair, you want to make sure not to make it look gray. She doesn't need to look old. She needs to look like she has black hair. Black gray is great for that because it's close to black, but not quite. And then you just do very minimalist highlights, like just the light reflections. Instead of highlighting the actual strands to give it like volume and shape, all you're going to do is highlight the reflection points, and it'll look really nice. Here's that dry brush of the typical, this is just, the normal Screaming Skull style bone color. Skeleton bone from Army Painter would work just as well. Same kind of thing. And you just do a heavy dose of dry brushing. I'm not trying to do highlights here. I'm not trying to make it shine. I'm trying to change the color. And as you can see, you get kind of this charred black bone that I think looks really, really great. I really enjoy it. You can definitely tell it's bone. It looks like bone, but it looks very dark and old and charred and, in my opinion, demonic. So I tend to do this with a lot of demonic stuff. Additionally, it lets you see the skulls more too, because the skulls are now a different style of bone, and so they pop out more. If you painted the altar and the skulls the same bone color, you wouldn't really be able to see them nearly as well. Now, when highlighting red, you don't want it to look pink, and you don't necessarily want it to look orange. You want it to look red. And I think the best point to do that is to make the base red fairly dark, and then just edge highlight reflection points. So first you're doing a normal highlight with just normal red, and then after that, so right now it's still just red, but by the time you get the orange out, it's a fairly reddish orange, and again, just the very bit of highlights there, and it just adds shape to it and really makes it pop, I think, a little bit more, which is kind of nice. So the first thing we're going to do on here is darken up that green a little bit, and then we'll also paint in the skull. She's got skulls in there as well. Now I thought about doing black skulls, but I decided to do red because again I wanted it to kind of pop and kind of fit the rest of the miniature a little bit, tie it in, make it seem like it fits there. So with her kind of reddish horns and the red cloth, I felt red, maybe even bloody skulls in this magic fit quite well. Alright, next up, the fun part. This is not actually a green wash, instead it is a glaze. So I took the green that I was using, I think it was jungle green. It's a very yellow green, a very bright green. And I watered it down, and then I watered it down more, and then I watered it down more, and then more, and then more, to where it was pretty much just a slight green water. You could have drinking this and not even seen it be thick at all. And what that does is it tints, again, bright colors, and because her skin's bright, because her skeleton bra is bright, because her horns are actually fairly bright, you can just kind of glaze it in there, and you can make it thick in the middle and then thin it out at the end and create an easy glow. It's a very easy OSL effect, and as you can see, here's the final miniature. I enjoyed her quite a lot. I had a great time painting her. Her face is quite small and a little hard to do. Anytime that happens, I tend to just do a little dot for an eye and just call it good. But I think between the glow of her magic and the black charred bone with the bright cloth on it, and then of course her in her purple dress popping out there, it's a very dynamic miniature and really stands out, that I think is quite good. I love anytime I can do a pop of color versus just a colorful mini everywhere, just because you tend to focus on that, and I think that altar makes of her the kind of perfect background or backdrop for her to kind of stand out. The cloth is right kind of directly behind her, so if you're seeing it from the back it looks great. If you're seeing it from the front it's not distracting, and so it's really just her in front of her altar, and she definitely looks like she's not a good character or somebody you want to meet, and so I really enjoyed playing her. She has a lot of personality of character in her sculpt design, and just in general it was a lot of fun to do. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below if you were okay with this style of video. Doing this kind of editing on the video really helps me make these more often, so I can get these to you as kind of like bonus extra videos when normally I wouldn't have one. Well, now I do, and you can kind of go along, and I'll still talk over it, and I'll put the description of the paints and everything, of course, in the description as always. But this really saves me about 6 hours of editing time. It's quite a bit to edit them as normal, and I wanted this to be kind of an enjoyable experience for you guys, maybe just to see in a little bit quicker format and a little bit easier on my time investment too. Anyway, either way, guys, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons. Without them, all of this would not be possible, whether it's the quality of the video you're seeing, whether it's the quality of the sound that you're hearing, or the quality of the game and the components and the content that are on your screen. All of that is thanks to them, because that's who I take money from, is from your generous donations and support, not from the game companies that I am supposed to criticize. As always, guys, again, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for your time, and I will talk to you guys again very soon.